Hello and welcome to Your Individual Wedding, the wedding podcast that helps you feel seen and celebrated as you plan a day as unique as you are. Hello, Kathryn. Thank you so much for joining me tonight and for agreeing to be on our wonderful podcast. We've been looking forward to having you on for a long time, so it's nice to see your smiling face. So for people that don't know you, haven't had the pleasure of knowing you or seeing your posts on social media, can you just introduce yourself, who you are and what you do?
Sure. So it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for asking me. It's been one of those things we've talked about for a little while, so I'm really excited to be here. I am Kathryn Palmer-Skilling. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm KPS Celebrant or Celebrant Kathryn. Either one, I pop up. And I'm a humanist wedding celebrant. So that means I have the joy of actually marrying couples and creating and leading ceremonies for them, which are completely unique and personal to them.
Wonderful. So how did you get into the world of being a celebrant? Where did that all start?
To tell the story, I have to explain what I call the wedding paradox.
Okay.
This is what I call it. So it's funny because years ago I had a kind of thought in my head. I was thinking, I'd like to do something a bit different. And at first I thought I wanted to be a registrar, which is interesting because I like that. What I saw was that ritualistic nature of going through kind of points in someone's life, like birth, marriage, death, all those kind of things. But what I found as I looked into that job a little bit more was I think it's almost guaranteed you have to drive, which I don't. And also I realised that registrars work super, super hard, which is not what put me off. But what it is actually you don't tend to have the opportunity to build a relationship with couples that you're marrying.
Sure.
So I realised that was kind of the bit I thought you did. I think because I had a really lovely friendly registrar when I got married. So I assumed everyone had that time. But then what happened was my husband and I were at a wedding of our good friends over in Southern Ireland. And they had a humanist wedding ceremony, which is legal in Ireland, just a point of note. And we'll come on to that later. And they had that because they wanted to have a ceremony that was completely unique to them, that honoured and reflected and married, for want of a better word, their cultures and their backgrounds and their families in a way that felt really authentic. And I remember sitting in this ceremony watching it, and David, my husband, was best man, so I was kind of sat not with him, so I was kind of very focused on the ceremony itself, mostly checking he didn't drop the rings. But I was watching it and I suddenly was watching the celebrant and I thought, that's what I want to do. That, because I could tell from how he was speaking how much he got to know Mercer and Carol and why the ceremony reflected them so well. So it was then I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be a celebrant. And I was already a member of Humanist UK. So it made sense to become a humanist celebrant. A humanist, for anyone who is wondering, is just someone who is non-religious. So I believe in compassion and empathy and science and the good in people and all sorts of things like that. Slightly different to saying I'm an atheist, although I don't believe in a god or gods, because I like the idea it's about what I do believe in, not about what I don't believe in. So often people say, an atheist, you don't believe in anything. I believe in lots. I just don't believe in God or gods, personally. Power to those who do.
That's a nice way of putting it, actually.
It's a really important nuance, I think, because it's that thing of I believe in loads of stuff. Just not that bit over there. So I watched the ceremony and thought, that's what I want to do. And here comes the paradox, because as soon as I started training, Mercer, who was the groom in that ceremony, turned around and quite grumpily said, well, you could have done this sooner and then we could have had a discount.
Lovely.
Yeah. Luckily, we have a very good banterful relationship, so I knew he was jesting. But I said to him, you see, without his wedding, I don't become a celebrant. So I can't do his wedding if he doesn't already get married. Hence the paradox. And that is my kind of very small Doctor Who kind of moment. Well,
I
I
like
realised
it.
that I can't have one without the other. So he will never, well, him and Carol will never get a discount on their wedding, because without it, I don't become celebrant. So therefore, wedding paradox.
Excellent. So it's nice that you sort of saw it for yourself. It's for your own eyes, and was like, that's what I want to do, and the power of what they were doing and how unique it was.
And the
Absolutely.
power of just ritual. And I think humans have been marking rituals for thousands and thousands of years in loads of different ways. We're drawn to ritual. And that doesn't mean that if you don't have a traditional faith in your wedding, that it isn't meaningful or filled with those moments that have real symbolism. And I think that's what I always try and talk to my couples about, in that it can be a non-religious ceremony, and I should again say non-religious, not anti-religious. There's a difference. But it doesn't mean it's got to be dry and a template and, you know, ceremonies A, B, or C kind of thing. It can be filled with real meaning, and not just a tick box.
Yeah,
it can do both, and that's why I think celebrant ceremonies are super, super important and beautiful, and why I love doing them.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know that you're really hot and passionate on inclusivity and diversity and accessibility. So do you want to share your reasons why and what you are doing, or the changes you want to see in the industry?
Sure, yeah. Well, reasons are because it's the right thing to do. That's the short reason. But,
yes.
But the I guess the longer reason is, so I'm a proudly disabled woman. That is my identity, and one of the communities I am proud to be part of. So for me, what was interesting was when we were planning our own wedding, realizing the complete lack of representation that there is in the wedding industry. Or there was, I was going to say, there was at the time, but let's face it, it's still the case. Spoilers, it hasn't got that much better. But so I got married nearly 10 years ago. Goodness, what a world we were in 10 years ago. We just had the Olympics. Everything was so lovely.
How times have changed.
Yeah.
How united we once were.
Oh, I know. So I got married 10 years ago, and I remember having some quite annoying and upsetting and eye-opening experiences when I was planning a wedding as a disabled person / disabled bride. And if you ever want to look at the highlights of my Instagram bio, you will see them. Lots of people just assuming that I would or wouldn't want to do something. Lots of people saying, sorry, if you heard that, listen, that's me turning my heater off. Lots of people just kind of assuming that if I didn't make certain choices, that it wasn't a real wedding. I mean, who would have thought that not carrying a bouquet was so important to the authenticity and credibility of my marriage?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, seriously. But also people in venues said things like, oh, yeah, we do have an accessible entrance. It's totally accessible. Come over. And then I discovered it was around the back by the bins. And they didn't realise that I was actually the bride. I mean, quite frankly, it's not okay for anyone to be using that entrance, but they seemed shocked that it was actually the person getting married. Yeah. So that happened. And I think at the time I was very different then. I was much less confident in my, and much less, I guess, not less proud, but I wasn't probably as active in that kind of inclusion space. I was just kind of I was trying to fit in. I didn't hide the fact I was disabled, I can't, but I wasn't kind of shouting it loud and proud, I guess, in the same way. I was kind of in a bit of a halfway house. And so fast forward, I guess, a few years when I became a celebrant, and I naively thought it might have got a bit better. And then I guess I just realised that you just don't see that representation. Now, I should say, obviously, not all impairments are visible. So maybe every picture I've ever seen in every wedding blog, that person has an invisible impairment or disability. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do. I'm going to wager they probably don't.
Yeah,
Not all of them. And suppliers as well. I found that, although actually I think suppliers are much less homogenous than maybe people first assume, but it wasn't as obvious that it was a diverse group of people in the industry. I think it actually is much more than I thought it was at the start, just for clarity. But so for me, it was really important to just make sure that the industry reflected the breadth and depth of people that exist. I suppose I should say one note here, because it is really important. It's not, I don't think, a widely known thing, is that I say all this and I talk about representation of disabled people in the wedding industry, as couples especially, fully in the knowledge that we do not have marriage equality in the UK for disabled people. It is not an equal playing field. Still in the UK, if you are, I'm saying UK, yes, I think it counts for 4 regions or 4 countries. If you are on certain disability-related benefits that are means tested, you lose them if you cohabit with someone.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's really shocking. So if you are a disabled person who is not on one of those kinds of benefits, such as myself, you hold privilege even within your own community, because I was free to get married and that wouldn't impact my financial independence, my financial security, my ability to live and pay for what I needed to pay for. But if you are, the assumption is that once you live with someone, they can just pick up the costs for you, for your life.
That's unbelievable, isn't it?
Isn't it ridiculous? And most of those means tested benefits are based around the kinds of benefits where you may be less able to work full-time in the current system. Now, I say that because, let's face it, if work was more accessible, people would potentially be more able to participate. It's not being disabled that stops people working. It is essentially capitalism and the Tories. Let's be frank. I'd love to dress it up another way, but it's normally ableism that's the problem, not the people.
Yeah.
So and you have this situation. Sorry, I cut you off there.
I was going to say no, and then they're punished even further by not being able to get married because they'll miss out. So they
even live together. Like I know long-standing couples. So one of them is on that kind of benefit, and they can never live together because they can't afford to not be on that benefit. They literally cannot access the workplace as it is. And so they can never have that kind of relationship. They could be happy and in love and have sex and all those kind of things, but they can never have that experience. And so I'm really mindful that when I talk about, let's make weddings more accessible, that I'm actually only ever talking to a privileged group within that group.
The community, of course.
I find it really interesting because loads of people don't know about this, and I'm no expert on the legality bit of it. I'm wanting to be really clear on that, but I kind of feel like if more people knew, am I surprised no one's kicking off about it? I don't know. The people that want to kick off about it haven't quite frankly might not have the energy.
Yeah, but I think it's not something that I knew, and I think a lot of listeners will be surprised to hear you say that.
Yeah.
And maybe we do need to say these things more, and that's what leads to people having the energy to do something about it.
And there are much more active activists and much more active disability rights activists in the world that you can find on Instagram who share and talk about this kind of stuff with more expertise and more lived experience than I have. So I should say that. But taking all of that into account, sorry, that was a very long answer, Ross.
It's fantastic.
Taking all that into account, for me, I just want people to be able to be celebrated as their whole and real and true selves on their wedding day. I don't want them to be celebrated despite the fact they're disabled or non-disabled. I marry all couples of any disabled status, non-disabled or otherwise. but I don't like this idea that someone gets less choice or has to make do with the thing that kind of works because it's accessible, not because it's the thing they actually want.
Yeah, sure.
All of those things. And sometimes the standardized template, looking at a ceremony in particular, doesn't work. And that's not to say that registrars won't adjust things. I'm sure they will. Of course they will. But you may not meet your registrar until you get to the end of the aisle, trying to let them know that you need to not have a ring or you're going to do something different because you physically can't do something, is not always possible with the best will in the world.
And it's not necessarily something a discussion you want to have on your wedding day. You might, probably want to turn up on your day knowing everyone is on board and with you and knows what you need, and you don't have to actively communicate all your needs on your wedding day because other people don't need to, and don't have to. So I totally get that. Absolutely.
So I think that's why for me it was really important. And I, like I say, when I was getting married, I didn't see any representation in the media, wedding media, I should say. And I see a bit more now, which is really cool. And I'm really pleased to see that that's happening more and more. And that is good. What I guess I still do see and acknowledge is that quite often when I am seeing couples where one or other or both of them are disabled, they're quite often white couples, heterosexual couples, or at least heterosexual presenting couples who are maybe models, all of those kind of things. So there's a load to do on intersectionality. But for me, it's just about saying, well, why wouldn't I actively celebrate people? And why wouldn't I not actively make sure that someone's getting what they want as well as what they need?
Sure.
And that's kind of why.
So did you, going back to your wedding a little bit, because you said you were maybe less, I don't want to use the word forthright, but less sort
You can use the word forthright, it's fine, because
do did you feel you got the wedding you wanted? Do you feel like you compromised at all?
We absolutely got the wedding we wanted. Genuinely, everyone thinks that it was all me, but it definitely wasn't. But that's because I had a really strong radar for suppliers that did not get it.
Okay.
And so they just weren't anywhere near our wedding.
That's good. Yeah.
So like the venue, I won't name any names. Take me out for a glass of wine and I'll tell you all of them. But the venue who, when I got there, having told me it was fully accessible and half of it was down a massive spiral staircase, said to me, couldn't I just try them? Can I just try the stairs?
Oh my God.
And for those of you who don't know me, I'm not a wheelchair user. I can actually do some staircases, quite a lot of staircases. I cannot do spiral ones. I certainly can't do them in a big dress, in heels, having drunk more Prosecco than I probably should have.
Exactly.
So, not going to happen. But just the fact that they, even though I checked, they said they're accessible and then just told me I could try them. Someone who, again, had like weird accessories that just weren't accessible. Someone, like I say, at a wedding fair told me that it wasn't a real wedding if I didn't have a bouquet, because I didn't want a whole sling. So I have limited use all on my hands. I knew I'd be holding on to my dad's arm. The last thing I wanted to do was have to think about something else in my other hand that has less strength to it. I just couldn't. And they're like, oh, well, it's not really a wedding that a bouquet. What? I love bouquets. I love them. It's not. It is a real wedding. So I found a bit weird. So things like that, I just surrounded myself with people that got it. A photographer that got it. I didn't know you then. Sorry, Ross.
It's all right. I wasn't. 10 years ago.
I was going to say you were like 12 years old, weren't you?
I wish.
You're
but I was. I don't think I'm still learning. If that, yeah. So.
I had a photographer that got it, a venue that got it, all of those kind of things. I didn't have a bouquet, shock collar, and yet my marriage is real. All of those kind of things. Funny that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we didn't compromise at all. But I just remember being slightly surprised because I think I just never really considered it until then. So no, I didn't make any compromises because I was in a position to access everything I needed to.
Yeah.
But I suspect if I'd faced more physical barriers, especially, then I would have had to make compromises. And I know disabled couples who have said to me things like, well, we didn't really like the vibe of that venue, but it was more accessible than the ones with really lovely staff, so we had to pick that one. And you just think, I understand that choice, absolutely. But
it's a huge limitation. Yeah, a huge limitation.
We don't really love it, but we're picking the thing that we know we can manage better than the thing we really want, but they just can't. It just isn't going to work. So
it's a case of sort of functionality over real passion. And
so often it is that, I think, when you're disabled in lots of areas of life, it's about, can you get in? Can you have your basic needs met? Fabulous, tick. As opposed to, can you enjoy it? Can you really get involved? Can you really participate? Can you be celebrated? All of those things.
Absolutely. We talk about really feeling celebrated. That's really important, because they're sort of accommodated, isn't it? And it's like you say,
word accommodated.
Accommodated, like you say, it's being able to come in via the bins, but you don't feel celebrated or valued.
No thanks.
Coming in by the bin, but they can accommodate you.
And there's a lot around that about permission and kind of begrudging and infantilization and all that kind of stuff links into that. And if you're not gonna think that our wedding is as fabulous as the next wedding, then I'm not gonna pay you.
Well, exactly. Why should you?
About it.
What about, sort of, you said like not all disabilities can be seen, and when we talk about accessibility in weddings, we often think about the venue. What are the other aspects that are sort of barriers, or that are extra considerations?
So obviously I think this is super individual, so I'm talking from my own lived experience, and that of some people that I know and are good friends, of course, and things like that. So just caveating that, I still actually think that quite often, apart from that kind of physical barrier, a lot of the barriers I see in the wedding industry are around what I call attitudinal barriers. So it is that assumption making, it's that not asking, it's for people that may have barriers with communication. It's for example, just an example, it's about making assumptions about whether or not they want to do personal vows. And I find that really interesting. You can absolutely do vows where you swap letters. If you can't vocalize your vows in a way that is comfortable to you, doesn't mean you don't get to have vows, or doesn't make that less important. I think it's about just thinking around how asking people, I think, about what works for them in their everyday life, and finding ways to transplant that into a wedding situation. So I've worked with couples where they have been, one or t'other of them have been, or both sometimes, have been neurodivergent. And what they actually just want is the way that we can make sure that ceremony is really accessible to them is having 5 minutes around the corner beforehand to just acclimatize. And to have whatever time they need afterwards alone to decompress. And having things like, forgive me, I don't know the official name, I call them like fidget toys, like things to like play with during the ceremony, so that if someone is feeling really overstimulated, they can focus on that. Or it's even, and I have done this with a couple recently, where it's ongoing, we're thinking really carefully about the positioning of them during their ceremony. And we haven't got an answer because they don't know how they're going to feel. Fair enough. It's like, are you going to, they're a bit worried they might feel a bit overwhelmed seeing everyone's faces. But equally, they kind of want to have an entrance. So it's that kind of, it's about us working together to think, okay, how can we give you the feeling of that entrance, but make sure you don't feel overwhelmed or on display, because that's a real trigger for them. So it's things like that I think it's really important to think about. Obviously, sometimes there are really specific access requirements that some people might want. So I'm not a celebrant that is fluent in BSL, but there are celebrants that can sign if someone uses BSL as their first language. Things like that, really, and having just different ways of thinking around things. And what I would always say is not everything will work for everyone, and ultimately the person who is getting married, the person who has the access requirement, will most likely have ideas of what can work, and placing them as the expert in that and listening to their lived experience is really key. And yes, they might not have had a wedding before, but they may well have spoken at a conference, been in front of an audience, for want of a better phrase, like situations where you can replicate things,
and they know what works for them.
And it's just about that, I think.
Definitely, I say to people, like, you know, you don't know everything about photography, but you know about you, and you know what you feel comfortable with. And I think it's giving people that power to feel that they can up and say. It's creating that space first and foremost, isn't it? For people to say, well, actually, this doesn't work for me, but this does. Yeah. And I think sometimes with suppliers, we're so quick to, I mean, generally, not you and me, but in general, we're so quick to want to share our expertise or even sometimes problem solve or provide an answer. Whereas actually sometimes it's creating a space where people can create their own ideas and educate you sometimes.
Absolutely. I think that is really, really key. And the other thing I always think is it's about, like, if something doesn't work, especially like on the day of something needs to change, it's not doing that kind of what I call a kind of builder's math, and like, oh, that's gonna be, that's tricky. And that is what's interesting is I've heard that from a couple of couples where I've worked with them. So other suppliers are going, well, it's gonna be a bit tricky if you're both doing that, or if you need that. We can probably make it work, but oh, come on. That doesn't. Do you feel celebrated? I don't feel celebrated. No, thanks.
No, that's.
And I understand things might be difficult or may take more thought or more planning. Oh well, that's called customer experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we just normalized everyone else's stuff. It's just if a non-disabled couple say we need this thing, maybe people are still making that kind of noise, but every human has access requirements. We've just normalized the ones that are most common.
Yeah.
Everyone does.
So true.
Everyone has stuff that makes them feel good about themselves, stuff that means they can do their day-to-day life in a way that's safe and comfortable and they can fully participate. We've just normalized all the stuff that isn't really specific.
Yeah.
Everyone has them. Like, if that's 8 hours sleep, boom, there you are.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, that's fine. Or, I don't know, like, my mind is blanked, but there are loads and loads that are just the kind of standard that people say all the time. But if some of them are actually, I need to do this slightly differently.
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, I love working in weddings, but I do think it's quite slow to change, and there is that kind of, but it's always done this way, and this is how we do it. And I think even when you come into the industry, I even felt pressure. Well, this is what you do as a wedding photographer. I felt that for a while until you sort of make the job your own. But I think it is so insular, and it's so kind of, oh, this is not how it's done. Or as much as I have couples say to me, oh, we're having a really different wedding, we don't want tradition, and actually their wedding day is still quite traditional. They just feel they're doing this huge different thing because they've changed one element. And that feels big to them because weddings are still so rigid.
Yeah.
So I don't sort of berate them or anything. I think you've not really strayed that far, and that's fine. You don't have to. But it obviously feels like you've done a lot because you've dared not to have a first dance, or you've dared not to have a cake, or someone else is doing a speech, and it feels like that's a huge break from tradition, which it is, but it's not really that huge, but it feels it because of the pressure put on you.
That's the thing, isn't it? That should be kind of like, fine, don't do it.
Exactly.
But you're right. And I think as a celebrant, this is so, I just find this so interesting in that some celebrants use the stand for their folder, some don't. I use one because again, holding things, I'd much rather not be relying on I can hold a folder, but why rely on that? If I can have a stand.
You can have something that holds it for you. Yeah.
And loads of celebrants have stands now. The other thing that I do have personally, and this is for couples as well, but it's just a little pet peeve of mine too, is that the amount of venues, I know you're getting a lot of stick, the amount of wedding venues on their website that have no accessibility information. I can find out if I can take my dog, but I cannot find out if I can take a wheelchair user in there.
Wow,
which kind of shows the priority we're being given.
Yeah, the priorities and where the perspective is. Yeah.
And even if you're not considering wrongly that it might be someone getting married who needs to consider the access, quite a lot of people have relatives who may be older or may be pregnant or maybe bringing a pram with them. All of these things that are kind of slightly more, and I hate to use it, but it's slightly more kind of normalised, that you might also just still need to know about the space. So when I get an inquiry in, if it's a venue I don't know, before I can even reply to that couple and waste their time potentially, I go to the website, I try and find out if I can physically access it, and 9.5 out of 10 I can. It's very rare that I can't. But I find I invariably can't find out on the website. So then I start Googling, researching, trying to find half an hour later, I might have found out by kind of finding a photo of someone's wedding on Instagram and going, oh, okay, I see the stairs now in the background of that picture. If I just zoom in, yeah, they've got handrails. Yeah, that's fine. Cool. I'm all good. Sometimes I do actually have to just ring the venue. And I've had to ring the venue and go, hi, I've received an inquiry for your wedding. Sometimes I have to say, I'm coming to a wedding. I'm a guest because it's easier. I just need to check this. And they're always lovely and they always share exactly what I need to be shared. And I always said to them, that's so helpful. Do you think that could go on your website? Oh, yeah. We'll feed that back or something. And no one's ever been anything but lovely to me. But there is extra work that I'm doing. And if I'm doing that, every guest is doing that. Not every, but every guest needs to be doing that. And if you just put it on the website, then it saves me a lot of work. I appreciate it. It just sounds like I don't want to do the work, but it's additional labor.
It's additional work that other people don't have to do. Yeah. When really it's a 5-minute job to put something on a website.
And I think people are embarrassed if they don't have full access. And let's face it, in an ideal world, when everything be fully, and for one, actually, fully accessible is a misnomer, because how can you prove that you're fully accessible? Every human being can't.
Yeah.
But people think they want to say they're fully step-free, for example, the most obvious venue type one. I fully understand that every venue can be. I do get that. So put that on your website and go, unfortunately, due to the nature of our building, we have some steps. There are handrails, but if you can't do any steps, unfortunately won't be possible or might be difficult. Or how you want to word it. And then that just means that couple go, that's a shame. We'll look at another venue, as opposed to emailing, feeling really like you're putting yourself out there, waiting for a response. Then we're still going and then finding out. All that kind of stuff. So lots of venues, but there we are.
Doing that if and saying that they're not accessible, it's still showing that they've taken into account people's needs. Even if they're saying I can't meet these needs, they're thinking outside the box of other people, people that aren't always thought about.
Yeah,
and that says a lot about you as a business, doesn't it?
Exactly. And just going back to our wedding, our reception venue is pretty accessible, obviously. But I noticed on a visit that their accessible loo was not as nice as their regular non-accessible loos. It was just a bit, it's fine, just wasn't as nice. Yeah. And so I had put in the contract, and they met it, that they put up a full-length mirror, that they put toiletries in that loo, that they did all that stuff, and they fixed a lot. But I mean, I shouldn't have to have had that put in, but I made them put it in the contract.
Yeah,
and they did it. And it was like, why haven't you just done this to everyone? Like,
Yeah,
why isn't it
standard.
always like this?
It's almost
But
what they can get away with. Let's do the
yeah,
bare minimum until it's brought
yeah, we
someone
have one.
who's from.
Tick. We have
Yeah,
an accessible loo. There's no mirror
yeah,
and there's no toilet recycling in the other one. It's not the same experience, and that's that thing. It's about equity, equal opportunities. When you've got access to a loo, what more do you want? Equity of experience. You're not looking at makeup in the handle, in the button that's slightly shiny, and trying to see what your makeup's looking like, and it's that kind of thing that's really important.
yeah. That's a really good point to make, actually, and I think people make that mistake a lot. That just because they've made, I don't want to say accommodations because that sounds patronizing, but just because they've made
that's
changes,
what they made.
yeah, that they haven't actually thought about the experience. They've just ticked a box, and you're not getting the same experience, and that's really a valid point. So I like that. What advice? So if there's people listening now that think, oh, I don't really still feel very seen and celebrated, and I am struggling to plan a wedding that, you know, with all my needs being met, and I'm what sort of tip would you give them as a starting point?
First of all, I hear you. Absolutely. I hear you. I think the other tips I would say is, I can't pretend it's not going to take longer to find the things that you want to find that really celebrate you and that meet your requirements. But I think be really honest up front and do not settle for something that you're not comfortable settling for. I'm a realist. There probably will be some compromises, because that, unfortunately, I think is life for someone with access requirements. Sometimes you make compromises, but make the ones that you're comfortable making and work out what your red line is.
Yeah.
And that's where you stop. And that's, for me, that'll be different to someone else. That's about, for me, it's about dignity and safety and feeling celebrated. They're my personal ones. For other people, that'll be different. And what those words mean to other people will be different, of course. So that would be one thing. And then talk to suppliers when you're meeting suppliers. Be open and honest and gauge how they're going to respond to that and how they're going to make sure you feel celebrated and part of something. And also, I hate this, if anyone in a supplier gets excited because they could do one of you in your portfolio, no.
Yeah, and it's quite easy to tell, actually, if somebody is coming across like that. Yeah.
And it might be less easy as a couple who's doing this for the first time, but I do think, like, it's inspirational when anyone gets married. It's not inspirational that you're getting married, particularly, unless.
Yeah, I get that.
So do you know what I'm
saying?
Do you know what I mean? So it's tricky, but it's there. And I just think, find suppliers who are your allies. You don't have to. And I have suppliers that all have lived experience of the same lived experience that you have, but people that will get it and ask questions and give you that confidence and expertise in your own understanding is really important.
I think, I totally agree. Not every supplier is going to have the exact same lived experience, but I think if they are showing a passion for celebrating different experiences and different identities, and taking the time, or if I don't know what it's like to live with a disability. I do know what it's like for people to make assumptions based on the fact that I'll be marrying another guy, and I've had comments and things since I've got engaged already. So
I'm sorry,
although I don't relate specifically, do you know what I mean? And it's just some people are able to want to know more and see you on an individual level because that's what they want from others and haven't always experienced that. Totally. And there are those people out there. It's worth waiting for those people.
Definitely. They are definitely out there. And Instagram is a great place to look, because you'll see people's feeds and what they're saying and stories and things like that. People's websites, people's blogs, if they have them, all of those things. You'll get a really good sense of just where people are at, I think, like what their mindset is and how they react to people. So that would be my message.
Brilliant. And if you had a message for a lot of the wedding industry are sort of small independent businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Where can they start to be more inclusive? What's the sort of actions that they can take?
So I guess I'm going to take this from the point of view of inclusive around people who identify as disabled or having a long-term health condition or chronic illness, or all of the kind of umbrella terms that's under that, however you want to define. I'm not about to tell you. But in that kind of umbrella.
Yep.
The really most simple thing that I think we can all do in our control, especially if we have a website or an inquiry route or something like that, and I know you've done this, Ross, so I can say it, is having an inquiry form. Having your inquiry form, like one of the boxes, do you have any access requirements that you need to know about at this stage? Or if you feel, so saying has someone got access requirements is not a dirty word, it's fine to say it. But if you do feel weird about it, for whatever reason, fair enough. You can use wording such as, is there anything you like me or us to know at this stage that will make your inquiry with us easier, or make us more able to give you a really positive experience from the start? Or you can use that kind of customer experience language. And then nice. Put something like that, and people might put anything like, oh, I need you to call we need to do it during nap time because my child will be here, or I have a really loud big dog, I don't know, so as long as you don't mind them barking in the background, because I say that because in my other life, where I work in advocacy and inclusion and things like that, we wanted to put that as the question on an application form, and it was amazing the stuff that people put through. It was just kind of essentially all boiled down to, I'm a human.
Yes.
Like, okay. But I think that's a really quick and simple way, because a lot of suppliers, I think, will go, oh, well, I check in with them once they've booked. If they can't access the inquiry call, if they need you to know that from the very start, then that's really important.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really key and really easy. And what I think is quite cute on my form is when I have couples that don't have access requirements, I've had 2 or 3 of them just go, oh no, thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Like,
it doesn't matter.
Like, cool.
You're not alienating people that don't at all.
Yeah.
No.
Like, if someone thinks you're woke for putting that on, then quite frankly,
they're not. Yeah.
I made a face.
We know the face.
That doesn't work so on a podcast, but I made a face that demonstrated my thoughts.
And what about sort of the sort of bigger companies, the bloggers and the media and the magazines that are sort of maybe have more influence or scope to make a change? So
I think it goes back to representation, and not just representation so you can say, oh, look how representative we are. So having where possible a cross section of images, a cross section of couples and people involved, not focusing purely on one kind of couple. So having visual images of couples with just couples and people with different demographics who belong to different communities as part of that. And it doesn't always have to be the focus of the story. This does not have to be like, disabled couple get married.
No, exactly.
That's not what it has to be. It can be, and it might be mentioned in a line in the write-up of, oh, as such and such used crutches, they decided they weren't going to have a traditional entrance, for example. Like, it doesn't need to be the whole focus. It doesn't need to be a special thing. And I think that can be the downfall, is it tends to be the, oh, look at this like extra special representative shoot we've got. And it's about having a breadth of those things. So I was involved in a shoot a little while ago where everyone involved, all suppliers and the real life couple, were like all identified, again, broadly under that umbrella of being disabled, being neurodivergent, having a long-term health condition. Again, that kind of broad grouping, all of us. It was brilliant. So nice to not be in a minority for once. And we submitted that to a few blogs, and I won't name, but one of the really big ones, who had been doing some work around representation previously to us submitting it said, oh, thank you, we've already had one of these recently, so we can't really show another one. We've already had disabled couple. Oh, okay, tick for the year.
Yeah.
I hope you're now saying that to every white presenting, female presenting, blonde presenting, non-presenting bride, because quite frankly,
yeah,
like I see quite a few of them.
Yeah.
You're not going,
another boho shoot.
Them.
Yeah, how many boho shoots have you done?
Had our boho quota for the year.
Yeah.
But can you imagine? And it was so interesting that it was seen as a niche. And I guess that's the other thing is, while we talked a little bit earlier about marriage equality, I think, and yes, there are disabled people that maybe can't get married because that would impinge their financial situation. There's also plenty of disabled people who want to be aspirational, who have money to spend. We're not all scroungers or Paralympians, but some of us just, have jobs and money. We'd like to spend it, thanks. So you want to be aspirational for everyone and get aspirational, not inspirational. But it's that thing of just giving representation to different people in different situations. You're not serving a massive chunk of your audience. And I say massive, like I think the current estimate is 20% of the working age population of the UK could, if they chose to, define themselves as disabled. That's 1 in 5. It's not
massive. Yeah,
exactly. No, not a lot of people will say, oh well, I don't consider myself that way. That's fine. But like if they could potentially be covered under the Equalities Act in that protected characteristic if they so chose to. So there's quite a lot of us kicking about.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, we're just not very visible. And because we're not very visible, we're seen as niche. And so because we're seen as niche, we don't become very visible.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It's that cyclical thing.
It is. And it's like when I was talking to Mercedes, who you put me in touch with.
Gorgeous Mercedes,
who we love. And we were talking about that whole idea that when you see black people, we're only just getting to the point where you see black people in an advert, it's not just an advert for black people. Do you know what I mean?
It's like Tesco.
Tesco. Sainsbury's,
black people shop in Tesco.
You can, and that's seen as niche. Tesco. Yeah, it's like, well, if you're showing that, then that's for that niche audience, and it's like, well, no, that's for everyone.
I'm no fan of Amazon. Just get that out there, but they've got an advert in a minute, and it's about having stuff delivered. And there's a guy who orders on the advert, who's a wheelchair user, who orders some cool wireless headphones so he can dance about listening to music using his wheelchair. And I waited, this is cynic in me, I waited for them to make a point about him being a wheelchair user, and they didn't. And I was delighted. It was just here's a guy who ordered a thing.
Incidental, now,
it doesn't counteract the huge amount of stuff that Amazon do wrong, obviously. But it was just an incidental human being who had ordered something from Amazon, who happened to be a disabled guy. Excellent. That'll probably come out now, and it isn't. It's just I bet it turns out he's not really a wheelchair user. But at time of recording, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And I'm going to choose that's the truth. And that's the thing, is just I can't remember, I've seen it a couple of times recently, and I get really emotional when I see it, because I'm like, that was at Etsy. There's one about a young teenage girl who pierces her ears, and her mum finds out. It's on TV in a minute. And she has limb difference. Not referred to at all in that advert, which I love.
And not what it's about, yeah.
And it's really interesting, because I just think, I never saw anyone with any kind of visible impairment, again, visible on television growing up, unless it was children need. Sorry, Pudsey, but really. Comic relief. All of those things, it's always in a charity setting.
Yeah, sympathetic, get the sympathy.
So it's really lovely, I think. So big companies are starting to get there. We just have to think the same way.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, and encourage it, and sort of, it's almost that kind of classic positive reinforcement, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, let them see that we love this, and they will do more of it.
And you do hear those stories of people complaining about representation. And unfortunately, that will consistently happen while we live in a white supremacy, ableist, capitalist, patriarchal structure. There, all of them, all the good stuff. Sarcasm. But the more we ignore that and do it anyway, the better. And Mercedes, just as an sorry, come back to her, is brilliant at when she just shoots. She's consciously, not in a kind of, we need someone from every demographic, but she just consciously thinks about making sure she's representative in front of and behind that camera.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And like I said, it's not about ticking boxes, it's about going, who is best, and are we just reaching the broadest audience, the broadest possible pool of suppliers? So
definitely. Lovely. That's a lovely way to finish, actually.
Right.
So you summed it up perfectly, and you've been an amazing guest. So just remind everyone what your Insta handle is and your website and everything.
So
because they're going to be so inspired, they're going to rush and read more about you.
As long as you don't call me brave, that's fine. Be inspired by me generally, it's fine. So I guess my Instagram handle is KPS celebrant, KPS_celebrant technically. But you can also type in celebrant Kathryn and I pop up. My website is celebrantKathryn.com. I've realised I need to spell Kathryn, don't I? Because there's 1,000 ways.
Yeah, which Kathryn
KATHRYN. No extra vowels. Efficient. I think. So celebrant Kathryn. That should have been my handle. Anyway, so that's that. And so not on Facebook. Yes, so that's why I'm lurking. I'm about to start an email list. So if you are wanting to get a monthly dose of blogs and
wit and wisdom.
Wit and wisdom. Oh, I like that. Let's do that. Thanks. About wedding planning generally, but most of it is ceremony planning. Not all about inclusion, but it'll all be inclusive because I can't be anything but, I hope. Join. It's going to be called the Feel Good Fabulous Wedding Playbook, I think. Playbook is an NFL term. I'm a big American football fan.
How are you?
I'm going for my niche there. It's a playbook. I love it. Anyway,
do you have a team? We're going off topic. We'll talk about this in a minute. We'll end up saying
I'll come
goodbye
back
for now, and we'll go back to the NFL offline. But thanks once again, Kathryn. And we'll speak to you again soon, hopefully. Take care.
Soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you.